everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. Welcome to TechStrong TV. Today's Tuesday, September 22nd. It's also the opening of DevOps World from our friends at CloudBees. The latest number is something like 23,000 people are registered for DevOps World. So I know Atlassian had a big one too, but this is probably one of the biggest DevOps online conferences we've seen so far. So congratulations. I know the CloudBees people worked really hard on putting on this virtual event, and congratulations to them for it. We've got a couple of DevOps World related content pieces on the schedule for today. First, I'm joined by Mitchell Ashley, my partner, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. You know, Mitchell was the executive chair for the executive track. Mitchell was the chair for the executive track at DevOps World, and also Accelerated Strategies Group did a pretty deep dive research project on software delivery management, which is one of the big announcements at DevOps World today. And Mitchell and I sat down to discuss the ASG report as well as his speaking and keynote at DevOps World. So it was a good report and a good conversation with Mitchell. Keeping in our DevOps World, keeping in our DevOps World motif for today, and I have my little CloudBees jug here. I was really happy to catch up with Sasha Labouré. Sasha is the CEO founder of CloudBees, behind DevOps World. And Sean Ahmed. Sean Ahmed is the SVP of product, I think, now at CloudBees. On the exec team there with Sasha. So we catch up with Sean and Sasha, and they're going to give us their preview of DevOps World as well as some of the news that are going to be announced today at DevOps World. After that, we're going to go to something old, and we're going to my friend Rosalind Radcliffe. This is a presentation from TechStrong Con, and Rosalind gave a presentation there on making your dinosaur dance to the tune of your digital transformation. There are a few people in the world who know mainframe and DevOps and enterprise like Rosalind. You know what? Rosalind will also be speaking. We're going to be announcing here real shortly our second annual DevOps Z, that's DEVOPZ, conference, which will feature, mainframe application and mainframe DevOps content, and I'm sure Rosalind will be involved in that. Rosalind is also going to appear on an upcoming episode of DevOps Unbound we're recording, which will feature app modernization and mainframes in DevOps World. So many thanks to Rosalind for that, and here's another great presentation she's done. After that, I'll be back with the news, and then as usual, I'll turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene's guest today is Chris Swain, CTO for Yahoo Small Business, and how organizations can manage the new in-office, remote, hybrid working environment for many employees. Good. That should be a good conversation. Charlene also has a preview on our webinars this week, and we still have, I think, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we may have like 6 webinars going on that you might want to check out. They're really good. And then I think that's going to be it today. We'll bring things to closing remarks. Mitchell is not on an analyst corner today because he is delivering live keynote at the CloudBees DevOps World event. So he'll be back with us on Thursday. Still a great show, though, today, so check it out. We're going to just jump to a quick commercial break, and I'll be back to discuss the ASG report that Mitchell and the Accelerated Strategies team did. So Mitchell, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, Mitchell Ashley was the executive chair for the executive track at DevOps World this year, and him and the team have put together an amazing lineup of speakers for that track, including Mitchell himself keynoting, Sanjeev Sharma is also speaking, and the Accelerated Strategies team also have done some really amazing research on several categories. I sat down with Mitchell to discuss the report and DevOps World in general. It's always nice to sit down with Mitchell and catch up. Here now is my conversation with Mitchell Ashley of Accelerated Strategies Group.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Okay, for our next segment here on TechStrong TV, I'm really kind of turning the tables a little bit, bringing in Mitchell Ashley. Mitchell Ashley, of course, is the CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell and I wanted to talk about a new report that ASG has worked on. It was sponsored, commissioned with the folks at CloudBees. It's part of the DevOps World coverage, which, of course, is this week. So, Mitchell, welcome.
Hey,
welcome back.
Good to be here. And excited to talk about this research. It's some really cool stuff.
Absolutely. So, Mitchell, let's start off. What was the research? What did you guys do?
Well, you know what? I've been inundated by survey requests and reports of, COVID, right? Working from home. But nobody's ever taken the perspective of, there's a whole population of people who already know how to work remotely, salespeople, executives, and software developers. So what can we learn from software developers? How have they influenced the organizations that they work with? And how is delivering software going now that everybody's working remotely? So that's really the perspective that we took. And we talked to 347 respondents across the globe, all sizes of companies, individual contributor and manager, multiple industries. So pretty good slice, pretty good segment of the market with some really interesting findings from it. So, but this is about.
Excellent. You're right. I think, especially in the tech world, one of the reasons I think we've been able to, do so well, relatively speaking, with all of the COVID and the remote, work from home and stuff, is that a good percentage of us have been working remotely or on the road as road warriors forever, right? It was just the normal course. We've put away our overnight bags and our don't check luggage, right? But we're used to not being in the office in physical proximity to our team members. And so some of the best practices that we honed over those years have lent themselves well, and we've been able to kind of disseminate, I would hope anyway, to disseminate that across the entire organization to other team members who perhaps weren't used to, not having the cocoon of an office, if you will.
Under better conditions, we would have planned, let's move all the workforce to remote work. We would have planned that much better, right? But when people had to make a shift within days or a week or so. So we've kind of learned remote work and benefited from people like software developers who have been doing this for a while, sort of reverse osmosis, if that's a way to think about this, that now everybody's come on, and they're working together. And there's some obvious things around collaboration tools, online meetings, kind of task-driven project management was something that kind of appeared at the top of the list. But I've heard a lot of people reference, the acceleration of digital projects, digital strategies, the move to the cloud. We had some really interesting data with that. So our data showed that, 52, just a little bit over 52% said that they had accelerated their move to the cloud. And 63% of the respondents said that they have somewhat or significantly increased the priority of digital transformation projects. And just under that, same thing for contactless services and for automation. So things that were already on the plate have moved either forward on the plate or reprioritized to the front of the line. So it really is happening. People are really accelerating their digital strategies.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know what? So that gives some, subjective numbers to objective kind of gut feel that I've had, or did I mix that up? Objective, that
I know
I've,
you're saying subjective guesses to objective numbers. I'm with you.
yep, you're with me. But it does seem like people, and necessity's the mother of invention with this, right? Here's my question, and it's funny, I was talking to a friend of mine in the real estate market. He's in the commercial real estate market, so he probably, he wants to think of, well, he has his own views on it, obviously, as a result. But how much of this, Mitchell, is going to stick, right? Or at some point, do we say, okay, everyone back to their cubes, and a lot of the lessons learned here and a lot of the progress made kind of gets put in the closet for God forbid does it next time.
Yeah, is this temporary, or what is going to stay with us? What's going to be semi-permanent or permanent? And we did look at that somewhat. One of the things we asked was, where do you see yourself going in terms of returning to work? And 23% respondents said that they plan to work permanently, remotely. Another 41% said they plan to work 3 or more days remotely. Only about 12.75% said they plan to go back on site. And that validated in line with some previous research that we did. Now, that's not getting the company's strategy and are they going to let people do that or what are they going to do? That's people's own preferences of what they think they're going to be doing. But that said, as you and I've talked about it, nobody knows how the future is going to unfold with all of this. And so you kind of have to be flexible. And the default right now is work from home. Is that another 3 months or 12 months? Who knows?
Well,
or permanent for that matter.
Yep. But you know what, Mitchell? There's also, look, we've both been in the IT world a long time. I've never seen IT go backwards. It's just like, how they say you can't rewind time, you can't go backwards in time. The investments of what you're making into the cloud right now, the infrastructure being moved there, the applications being developed are not going to go away. You're not going to stop using them, right?
You're not going to flip the switch and go 180 back to what you were doing before, right? You're going to move forward from that. And some of those things are just going to stick because that's how you're doing it now.
Yeah. Well, and quite frankly, ultimately they'll stick, not just because that's how you're doing it now, because they're better. If they're better, if they're more efficient, if they give you an advantage, it's Darwinism at its best. And so
it is.
Regardless of whether you can go to an office or you can go back to what you were doing before, if it doesn't give you some inherent advantage, you're not going to.
Yeah.
It's market and everything else.
There were some really interesting things that I found from this too. There were some things that were better and some things that were not as good. Like people found scheduling meetings and also actually getting their work done, getting things done in a timely fashion was actually easier, like pretty significant, almost half of the people said that. They also said balancing work and meetings and getting decisions made from upper management. Those are bigger struggles. The real struggle, though, was managing unproductive distractions. About an equal percentage of both said either it's better or it's worse. It's easier or it's harder. So some people adapted to that. Of course, I'm sure that's, your home situation and family and whatever, or just how you work and manage your own distractions. But that was kind of interesting that about the same size group said both, Yeah,
that is half and half. I think I would have liked to have a follow-up question with that. How many children do you have? And do you have a significant other in the house with you? And maybe cats or dogs. And then correlate. Right, correlate all of
offices.
That. Yep. It would be
interesting.
Yeah, interesting stuff to that. So Mitchell, I think here's another question though that all of this raises in my mind, which is it sustainable in terms of the human cost, in terms of the work-life balance? And I don't know if you asked any questions on this in the survey, but you know, quite frankly, when there's nowhere to go, you're home anyway, you wind up picking up your computer and doing work because you've watched everything on Netflix already that you're interested in, right? But there will come a time where we could go to the movies again and we can go out again and we could do things again. And and so that work-life balance, I think our work-life balance has been a little bit out of kilter because there's nothing to do but work. And so, organizations have reaped the benefit of this, right? And so we're being really productive. We're really developing and doing all of these things. But A, is that sustainable, right? Because you got to worry about burnout, stuff like that. Perceived advantages that we're seeing right now hold up.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting when some portion of people go back to the office, whatever's, if it's 12% or 40%, I don't know what that number will eventually be, and you're the remote person now, kind of back to that model, as opposed to we're all working remotely. I can tell you my own experience in just running IT. I designed an approach called work anywhere, because everything was designed to be in the office. And if you were remote, you were seriously disadvantaged, right? It was all set up to be in the office. And that's a different setting than we are right now, where everybody's remote, because there you didn't get to see half the stuff. You couldn't see the whiteboard. You couldn't really see everybody in the conference room. And, it's not as good as it is now, if this is good, if you want to describe it that way. I think it's just interesting in the data. It was like over 60% of the people said they wanted to work from home 3 or more days a week, up to permanently. So I think the personal preference is there. You also have is it safe and am I comfortable to go back into the workplace? And usually organizations say, for the most part, they say 2, but I think it's going to be around. This situation could be around at least for quite some time.
Got it. This whole thing, Mitchell, though, and I, you know what? Let's explain to the audience a little bit. I know you gave sort of the gross number of people who participated, but exactly who were these people a little demographics, if you can, so we can understand this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, some demographic information. These were about 40% came from North America, US, Canada, Mexico. 34% of it came from EMEA, from Europe, Middle East, Africa. Almost 13% was India, 5% was South America. There were 23 different countries and regions that we got responses from. Once we got below 5%, it was a couple percent or under a 1%, so much smaller. And it was about 50-50 from individual contributor to people that were in a manager through a VP or a C-level role. So that was a pretty healthy mix of both. It was just about even between the two. And about half the response were from companies greater than 1,000 employees. And we broke it down more finely than that, but about 35%, under 1,000. So smaller businesses were about half the respondents, and about 35% were over 5,000. So heading up towards the enterprise size. So it's for a 350-ish responses, which is, a decent sample size to work with. It had a pretty good population. It's one of the reasons why when we did the analysis, I didn't try to break it out too much by all those demographic groups, because when you start to tease them apart, you don't have 200 people in one group, you have 20, and that's not enough to necessarily draw some major conclusions from, but you can collectively through the data.
Got it. Mitchell, I guess the next thing is, we look at this. So if I'm, CloudBees was a sponsor of this. If I'm a CloudBees or I'm another tool vendor, service provider to the application development, DevOps space, how does this affect my business? What should I be doing to play into this?
And I'm sure they're asking, everybody's asking themselves this. What I found really interesting in the data was that some of the DevOps principles, things like daily stand-up meeting, this is Agile and DevOps, but daily stand-up meetings, cross-functional teams, automation of tasks, self-assigned tasks, those kind of things expanded beyond just the IT software development team and into the groups that they were working more closely with. And they also identified that they're working much more closely with product management, project management, operations, security, even executives. 25% of respondents said that they were working more closely with their executive leaders. So in a way, whether all those groups think of themselves as using DevOps or Agile principles, they're starting to operate and think that way. So if I'm a value stream type of company wanting to report that information, they're going to understand some of these concepts of what the development teams are doing now, where maybe 6 months before, maybe they didn't have as great a understanding of that, or they may have more in-depth understanding of what's actually happening in the organization or cross-functionally, whether it's vertically or horizontally. That to me says, if you're in a product company, unless you're selling just to, a developer, so let's say, if you're providing something that can be a benefit to either IT management or other customers within the organization, they can start to understand some of those concepts. So maybe you build more screens or reports or an interface that now it can be introduced to them. I mean, that's at least one potential impact of this.
Excellent. Mitchell, obviously if they go to DevOps World, they can get more information about the report. But where else can they get maybe a hard copy of the report or a summary or more information?
Yeah, you can get the full report. If you just go to Accelerated Strategies, our website, accelst.com, just scroll down past that first picture, it'll be right there. It's right there where you can click on it. And Alan, the way you know this, but not all the listeners and watchers may know, when we do a report, we do a PDF. This is mostly graphics. It's got a couple pages of written text, but it's meant to be consumed very easily. You can just look through it and say, that's interesting, that's interesting. I want that stat in my next presentation to my boss. And by the way, on the download page, there's 6 videos about the report. Why did we look at software developers? What did it say about productivity? Are people more interested in measuring productivity during remote work or not? Were they more productive? How about the speed of software delivery? Was that impacted? So you actually don't have to read the whole report. You actually don't have to read anything. You can look at the graphics and some of the numbers, watch videos, whatever helps you consume in smaller bites. That's all available where you can download the report at accelst.com.
You know what, Mitchell? I love it. That's the charter there at Accelerated Strategies Group, right? Knowledge wants to be free, man. And it is a great way of people being able to take that in. Excellent.
People love our reports. They're like, wow. I mean, we get a lot of wow comments. To me, that's you're doing something good if people say wow. So I love it when we hear that. I hope we get some more folks, more folks telling us that.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll have to go check it out. Hey, Mitchell, thanks for the info on the report. Thanks for all the great work, actually, you've been doing this whole lead up into DevOps World. Of course, you're the track chair for the executive leadership track, right? And
yep.
I know I'm doing you're keynoting. I have a panel I'm doing with you, and we're real excited. So excellent stuff.
A lot of good stuff. And stay tuned. We have couple more reports in the pipeline, not very far to drop soon. So we have more things coming.
Excellent, man. Good stuff, Mitchell. All right, Mitchell Ashley, founder, CEO, Accelerated Strategies Group, here on TechStrong TV. I'm Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest. You know, I've been participating in well, first it was Jenkins Days, then it was Jenkins Days slash DevOps World. It was Jenkins World slash DevOps World, now DevOps World. But I've been participating in these now for 5 or 6 years. And I've really enjoyed seeing the event grow in both size of attendees as well as presentations. And also over that time, over the years, I've had a chance to strike up a great relationship with Sasha Labouré, the CEO founder of CloudBees. And over the last few years, Sean Ahmed, who's come on as a result of an acquisition and is now SVP of, I think it's SVP of product. He's an SVP at CloudBees. I had a chance to catch up with Sasha and Sean to give us a preview of DevOps World and what's happening this week and some of the big announcements coming from CloudBees. There's been so much going on in our DevOps space the last couple of weeks with IPOs and mergers and acquisitions and money raising that sometimes we can overlook. A great company like CloudBees and what they've been doing as growing along with the rest of the DevOps community. So here's my interview with Sasha and Sean Ahmed, of Sasha Labouré, about a preview of DevOps World this week.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another session here of TechStrong TV. Got some first of all, I have two good friends as my guests today. We have Sean Ahmed and the one and only Sasha Labouré, CEO of CloudBees. Sasha, Sean, welcome to TechStrong TV. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Alan, for having us.
Doing very great. Good to see you again, Alan. Good
to see you. Big news today. It's DevOps World Day, right? DevOps World Week, if you will. This is the first fully virtual DevOps World, as is most conferences these days. But the good news is in some ways, these virtual events have become a huge democratizer because people don't have to worry about paying for hotels or airplanes or missing work or travel time. They're free. You can log on from whenever. You can log in and log out and log out and log in. As a result, you have something like over 17,000 people registered for DevOps World. Is that right?
That's yesterday's news. We're about
all right,
that.
on my old news. What's the new news? Shoot me. But seriously, I mean, Sasha, I remember sitting with you in the San Francisco Moscone Center last year. And you said, my God, Alan, can you believe this? We're here in the Moscone Center, and we've got, what was it, about 2,500, 3,000 people maybe?
Yeah, it was a huge jump, and we were very proud of that. And now we have like 10x this, and you're right. It's a huge democratizer. If we look at the locations where people come from, it comes from so many countries. We have like a lot of people coming from, attending, not coming, but virtually coming from Asia, from, in India, we have a lot of people. And that's amazing because I think a lot of those people would simply not have been able to even think about coming to the not so cost efficient San Francisco.
Absolutely. So there's a lesson there somewhere, Sasha. I'm enough of a businessman to see that. Sean, you know what I realized? I jumped right in with Sasha because him and I have been doing these for a very long time. You and I have only been doing them for a couple of years. And I introduced Sasha as the CEO. I never even introduced you or your position. So why don't you tell our audience, what do you do at CloudBees?
Yeah, sure. So I get to look over all of our business as it relates to SDA, SDM, how we take it to market, how we sell it, the messaging, the narratives around our product, the direction of it. I work closely with our peers in product organization to sort of bring it to market and what we're going to build for our customers, what problems to solve that are interesting, in the market. And I work very closely with Sasha and try to give him as much of a headache as I possibly can on a daily basis. That's sort of my ulterior motive on a daily basis.
Okay, doing well. So, guys, I know we don't have a lot of time. You're busy. Today's these virtual events, even though they're virtual, it's hectic. Let's cut right to it. There's some big news. You guys released some big news around the event today, both in terms of product and other stuff. Who wants to share with our audience? Who's going to take the lead here? What's the big news?
Well, I'm going to let Sasha go with this one because, Sasha, this is really big news. It's been 2 years since we announced some of these big news to the market on what we were working with. So I'll fill in the blanks, but I'll let you go because this is a proud moment for all of us in the company and especially for you as the CEO and founder of this company. So I'm going to let you go first.
All right, I'll do the easy talk, and I'll let Sean do the hard stuff. So essentially, we have that vision we're executing against of building essentially the CRM of software delivery, right? What you're using Salesforce today to put all of your data and get a consistent view of your space, and then from there the sky is the limit. We don't have that in software delivery, and even in those troubled times, everybody has seen that, right? You have teams now working completely from home in so many locations. What you could do simply by raising your head outside of your cubicle to ask questions, none of that is possible these days. And so, software delivery management, SDM, sits on top of CI/CD and makes it possible to gather all of that data, create a normalized object model. Much like in Salesforce, you would have accounts and contact and opportunities, but guess what? The opportunity at Cloudbees in the SDM is a feature, right? Everything revolves around features you're going to be pushing to market. And there you have teams, you have environment, application, vulnerability, whatever. And we pull information from those systems so we can extract intelligence out of that. And so we're going to market in Q4. It's just, I can tell you for all of the development teams, there is huge excitement to land there with the first two modules. So what are modules? Essentially, you can see this base foundation that's available as a SaaS. By the way, everything I'm talking about here is SaaS. You connect your systems to the SaaS, we collect information, and then on top of that, we instantiate specific modules that will focus in a very specific way, right? Like through a specific facet, look at this data and serve some specific features. So one of them is going to be around developer efficiency. How can you look at what your developers are doing? Not so much because you want to be a cop and look at whether you need to use a whip, but really more in a way of understanding the meta behavior of your teams, right? For example, are your teams spending a lot of time on working on features, or are they working on being interrupted because you have fires left and right, or you have other type of interrupt? If you drill down, you have deadlocks taking place and so on. So understanding things out of this distributed chaos that's taking place where everybody's working from home and from different offices, and have this brain that can make sense of all of this and share that with you. And we have other features like feature management. It builds upon what the acquisition we did last year of a company called Rollout that provides feature flag, which is great for developers. And now with feature management, we really make this much more of an analytical tool to make decisions around features.
Very cool. Sean, I'm going to give you a chance. You want to? Well, there's more news. Do you want to? Should we jump in on SDM and this stuff, or do you want to go to the other news as well?
I think it's an exciting moment for SDM. So I'm not sure I'm ready to jump off that train yet. But one of the things Sasha and all of us set out as goals for ourselves when we first announced SDM to the market was that there was a series of things that we wanted to solve as it relates to software delivery management that we didn't feel like existed. And Sasha talked a little bit about the technology, how it's built and so on. But Ellen, you and I had a talk a few months ago where I think we chatted about these challenges. And we said the perhaps most important aspect of what SDM can do for our customers is to provide a way to get universal insights to the entire team of people, legions of different teams that are involved in the software development and delivery process to collaborate better, to be able to get insights that are most important to them, not just a ton of information, but the information you need at the time you need it to be effectively collaborating. And that type of universal insights today is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to get on value delivery. When you look at sort of when an idea pop up and all the way through to when actually value delivers as delivered as software to an end user, where is value stuck? Where is the code stuck? Where does the error happen? What happened to the workload? Which teams worked on it? How effectively did they work? Is it one epic or a story that is more difficult to get through than another one? Are we unusually experiencing long time with the workloads? But more importantly, as we start making the transition also much harder into the DevSecOps arena, you have to think about sort of more the progressive delivery side of things. So it's not just being able to have the visibility and so on, but what is the story around how do you get audit-ready pipelines left to right from a value stream model? You know, how do you think about governance in that process? How do you think about policies and audit-ready pipelines that at a moment's notice can be ready? So when we think about our SDA suite, and we think about the visibility that comes from SDM when you pull these two things together, we believe that we're finally arrived at the first sort of incarnation of CloudBees where our customers can really truly build that software delivery backbone, that system that every organization needs, just like Salesforce provides your order to, you know, or opportunity to order, or SAP provides order to cash process. We can finally build a backbone that allows you to invent an idea and bring it and deliver it as software. That backbone is required, and we've centered around a feature as the entity that transfers and brings all that data together. Now, audit-ready pipelines are really important in the DevSecOps arena, but so is feature flag integration. We've integrated feature flags into SDA in such a way that our customers can increasingly start decoupling, you know, feature releases in a safe way from the actual big, larger deployments. So now Sasha talked about SDM and that visibility, but now imagine having the power of getting early feedback loops by releasing software and features out incredibly progressively. Even if the feature is not fully working yet, with experimentation and ops toggles that allow you to test and see, is this feature working out? Is it not working the way? Is it performing the way we want? Does it have the behavior we want or not? And on the basis of that, be able to turn it on and off in the production environments without having to do a rollback over the weekend. That's extremely powerful, right? So all that hardening that we've been doing of the products plus the SDM, it's a really exciting time for our customers and a really exciting time to be at CloudBees. So these two things go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I always try to explain to people that so much of DevOps, we analogize to sort of lean manufacturing, lean IT, the software factory. And, you know, software gets built on the factory floor, on the assembly line, if you will. But well-run assembly lines are well-run because the factory is managed, right? There are managers who manage that line, who manage how many parts are there, how fast stuff's going, right? To me, SDM is the factory management, where SDA is the assembly line, right? That's where people are assembling, no pun intended, but, you know, assembling today's software. And this is how we manage it. Yep. So excellent news. And Sean, you and Sasha, you as well, touched on a couple of other things. The feature flags, which has really become such a powerful part of today's software development, because as you said, Sean, we can decouple now, right? We can decouple multiple things and test them all in parallel and figure out what works, what doesn't work pretty quickly. Yeah. You mentioned DevSecOps. I knew there was some, I thought there was some news around DevSecOps. Anybody want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Sasha, you want me to
Go ahead.
Talk about that one? Yeah. So we're making a series of announcements related to DevSecOps, Alan. I mean, we have been working very hard to overall build a very strong DevSecOps or security disposition within everything in our software, specifically Cloud-Beast CI and the Cloud-Beast CD software. And what we've been trying to do is holistically look at the workloads and pipelines, not just from the code level, but also how it's accessed, how it's run, just a general end-to-end delivery of a code artifact, and from an idea and all the way through to production. And we looked at each point of this crucial delivery backbone, and we said, what kind of security is required? What is required at each one of these various steps to ensure that the overall disposition of a organization is as secure as possible should troubling times occur, like for instance being audited. We talked about what audit-ready pipeline really means. We thought about how do you quickly be able to tell a governing agency, who touched what software piece at what point in time, approved by when and whom, and how did it arrive, and which systems did it go through? Because it may have arrived at production, passed some tests, all of a sudden something happened, and our customers were left exposed, and now we want to figure out where to go fix it. That type of auditability and readiness is almost impossible, if not very difficult, if not impossible for some, to actually provide that auditability at a moment's notice. So what we've been working on very, very hard is to make that auditability possible. So we integrated our CI pipelines transparently with our CD pipelines in a way that gives you end-to-end visibility and data sharing, so that when you set your governance rules on any piece of software you're releasing, any policy, exit and entry gate, you control that release on data evaluated, events evaluated, not just in the CD or release cycle, but in fact all the way back in your CI and workloads and tests that you're running, scanning and build processes. You can evaluate all of those different conditions and set policies for how your software is released. And at a click of a button, you get that audit pipeline ready. That was really important. The other thing was just, how do you run the software? Well, we want to make sure that when you implement and use cloud-based solution, that they are secure. And we're very proud to announce that this past quarter, we hardened cloud-based CI in such a way that we got a DoD cert, ready to field cert, that is very hard to get. It's a cert that says that DoD, Air Force, any government agency, that cloud-based have passed all the stringent requirements for it to be secure for government to use. And we're excited about that. That makes sure that things like granular RBAC control, how the images are run, are secure from penetration and bad actors, backed activity, granular control over each one of the smaller stages as software moves across, whether it's a folder, whether it's a software, whether it's the actual controllers that are controlling the build process, that level. So Alan, these are just a few of many, and I'd love for your audience to come and check it out online. We're going to be talking about security hardening of our products quite a bit, but these are just a small 2, 3, 4 sort of teaser and taste, teaser of some of the capabilities we've added as we have significantly strengthened our DevSecOps disposition in the product. And I don't know, Sasha, do you have anything to add there? But feel free to.
It's hard to speak above this level of passion, so I'll just...
Well, you know what, guys, we're almost out of time. So if you don't mind, I'm going to come back to Sasha. Lots of announcements. People can go to DevOps.world, and there's a great report out from the Accelerated Strategies Group on SDM. Mitchell Ashley, CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group, full disclosure, I'm a co-founder, is delivering keynotes there, and there's a lot of great stuff. But Sasha, I got to add, let's go back to where we started this interview. We've got a virtual DevOps world with maybe 20,000 people, right? Registered. How many come? I don't know. What do you think this means for the future of the DevOps World Conferences? Next year, God willing, we have vaccines and treatments and COVID's in our rearview mirror. But isn't there a reason we should we should have some element of virtual to our gatherings, to our conferences, to allow, as we said, Sasha, in the beginning, for the democratization of people who otherwise wouldn't be able to attend?
Yeah, very much so. This has acted as a impressive forcing function for all of us, and it would have been bizarre, I think, last year to simply say, you know what, we're going to stop our conference and just go fully virtual, because we would have felt like we were at a disadvantage versus the rest of the world. And now we've all been forced to normalize on this new setup. So we're doing those conferences in this way, which democratizes this knowledge so much more. But it's just the start of it, because you could argue, as you just said, right? Why wait a year to do the conference? Why can't we do smaller, more regular touch point? What's the best way to find that? I think a lot of discovery will take place in the next year as to what's the best schema for this, but it opens a lot of amazing opportunities in terms of spreading knowledge.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got a busy day today. Good luck with DevOps World. I'll be in. I'll be there, lurking, listening, watching, learning. Keep up the great work. Congratulations on SDM, because it has been a journey, and it's not just the two of you. I know Anders and so many people at CloudBees, had a hand here in doing this. So it's nice to see it come to fruition. Congratulations, and come join us again soon. Sasha, I don't see you enough, my friend.
I know. We should Zoom more frequently.
Absolutely.
All right.
You too,
Thanks a lot,
Sean.
Alan.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Alan. Appreciate it.
Sasha Labouré, Sean Ahmed from CloudBees. DevOps World's taking place now. Go check it out. Take care, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back. So if you're going to talk about mainframe, Z enterprise systems, and DevOps, there's really only one person you want to talk to, and that's Rosalind Radcliffe. Rosalind, of course, is a distinguished engineer at IBM, and she's always willing to appear and talk, and I generally like interviewing her as well. Here's a session that Rosalind did for our TechStrong Con back in June, called Making Your Dinosaur Dance to the Tune of Your Digital Transformation. And as I mentioned, Rosalind will be presenting at several upcoming virtual events for us here at MediaOps, so stay tuned for that. But here now is Rosalind Radcliffe in Making Your Dinosaur Dance to the Tune of Your Digital Transformation.
Hello and welcome to the TechStrong Conference, and thank you for joining me in this challenging time. We as technologists have to stay together no matter what's going on in the world, and thanks to our technology, we really can. We have the opportunity of just working from anywhere. My name is Rosalind Radcliffe, and I'm an IBM Distinguished Engineer. And today I'd like to talk to you about making your dinosaur dance to the tune of your digital transformation. And I know it might sound a little strange to have an IBMer saying making your dinosaur dance, but when I was thinking about this session, I thought about Lou Gerstner and his Making the Elephant Dance of IBM. And I thought in today's world, that might be just the right message to bring. We really need to bring the systems that we're using, the systems of record, the IBM Z, that is so heavily depended on across the industries to bring it into this digital world. We're hearing so much about COBOL right now, and COBOL being the problem. I want to talk about and show how it's not that COBOL is the problem. It's really that we technologists need to recognize that ZOS and the IBM Z is the most modern system out there, and we should be using it for what it provides. Take advantage of the abilities that it has, the security, the reliability, the performance characteristics, and not hide it behind that green screen that you might know. In IBM, I'm responsible for driving the DevOpsable nature of ZOS, but I really spend my time working with clients and helping them on this digital transformation, helping them bring DevOps into their world, including IBM Z. And so today I want to talk to you about what we've done, what's available, and try and show you the cloud native development environment for ZOS. It might surprise you a little. I want to start with DevOps. And when we talk about DevOps, I think we really mean biz, dev, sec, QA, inf, ops. It really is that bringing together of the entire organization, but that doesn't work for Twitter, so we call it DevOps or DevSecOps. And when we think about it, we need to make sure we're thinking about it from all of our systems perspectives. And when we talk about DevOps, we generally think about cloud native development. We think about those digital businesses that started out on the cloud. We don't necessarily think of those back-end systems of record. And so I want to talk about how it really does apply no matter what you're building for. The other thing that I want to point out is culture. And in order to do transformation, you have to think about the culture. You have to think about the world we're living in and how to transform that culture to let everyone work together better. The culture in the traditional Z environments probably looks a lot like when I started with IBM. I started in 1987 in ISPF development. Yes, that was a while ago. And back then, we had some very particular ways of doing development. We used ISPF. We didn't have a lot of the processes and tools we have available today. And over the years, that process for ZOS in many shops remains stagnant. The same way I did development, I can still see developers doing development for ZOS. The culture hasn't changed. So let's think about it. Can we change that culture? Can we bring ZOS into that same cultural environment? And we think about DevOps, we think about this infinity loop, and we think about trying to make sure that we can flow through this to get fast feedback. How quickly can we get testing done so we can get that fast feedback? How quickly can we get this out for a consumer so they can tell us what they think about it? I know many times we talk about DevOps, people talk about testing in production, and I know what the reaction to that word is for many of my customers. You can't test in production. Well, we don't mean testing in production. The code is actually already tested. What we're doing is experimenting. We're looking to see what's the best way to interact with users. What's the functions we want to provide? Will this marketing campaign work in this region? That's testing in production. It's not throwing code directly into production. It's using an automated process, an automated pipeline to allow you to test as quickly as possible, get feedback to the developer back as quickly as possible, and help improve your overall process. The trick for this, though, is the automation that is behind it. You're not going to move faster unless you focus on the automation to allow those developers to get that fast feedback. How can they do testing? In order to do unit testing, do they have to bring up the whole application? Do they have to step through the code using a debugger? Can they write an actual unit test? Why not? Why not with COBOL write an actual unit test? Why not do the same kind of development that you do in any other space? So if I do that and I change the culture around the development process so that when I write my code, I write my unit test at the same time. I can test my code in isolation. So I don't have to deploy it into my Kix environment, into my DB2 environment, but I can run my unit test on z/OS, but in isolation. So I can actually go through my code. I can make sure it does what it's supposed to do before I have to deploy it and run it in a system. If I can get that automated, then I can get that fast feedback. Automating the next step, automating integration test, automating as much of the test as possible, and automating the deployment process as well. This infinity loop works because I've automated it. I've automated that deployment process. And that doesn't mean just copying the load modules. It means automating whatever infrastructure changes are needed as well. By having this completely automated process, you can really deploy your changes, test them, get that fast feedback, make sure it's ready, and then allow it to go farther on down the loop. One of the things I said is I want to focus on this idea of cloud native development. And so if we look at this process, hopefully it looks similar to any other cloud native development process. I have a developer, in this case named Deb, who has assigned an issue that needs to do some fix, some problem, or some enhancement to her application. She's working in an OpenShift environment. So in the OpenShift environment, she requests her project area. That project area will allow her to work on her application. That project area is being provisioned for her in the OpenShift environment. It's a sandbox. It's true z/OS running in a container in the OpenShift environment. And it can have her application pre-configured and set up. And then she gets to pick what her work experience is. Does she want to use VS Code or does she want to use Eclipse? Does she want to use a code-ready workspace? Yes, a Red Hat code-ready workspace running a COBOL or PL1 or assembler editor in order to allow her to do development and connect it to that sandbox that she's been provisioned. Sounds like cloud native development to me. Just happens to have a little COBOL in there and a little Kix in there, but it's the same kind of environment. As a developer, I don't care. I don't have to worry about talking to a system programmer or opening a ticket to go get my system set up. I get to use the tools of my choice. I get to clone my repo. I'm using Git. Same SCM I do with my distributed side, I use for my z/OS side. I can use application discovery to understand the application. I can look at my application in detail and understand what I need to do for that application. I can build my code simply in my workspace. I'm making my code change and it's working with a sandbox to do that compile. I can't compile COBOL code on my workspace itself because it needs to run in ZOS, but I can compile it in that container called a sandbox. I can compile it and I can test it. I can run my unit test. I can then say it's ready. I'm ready to have it move forward. And I can have that provisioned and deployed into additional container environments, and I can run the full automated pipeline. I get the insights back from the tests that have been run. I can see whether or not all of the tests have passed, or if I broke something else that I didn't realize I might break. I get that fast feedback because the pipeline can provision each one of these environments and can run the tests for me, the automated tests that have been running. If you look at this picture, and I'm talking about ZOS development, it looks a little different. I've got Red Hat OpenShift environments on here. I've got my code being stored in this particular case in GitHub, but it could be in GitLab. It could be in whatever Git environment I want it to be. I'm using Jenkins, but I could use whatever CI/CD coordinator is appropriate for my organization, and I can store it in whatever artifact repository is appropriate. This experience allows me as a developer to not have to worry about whether or not I'm doing Java code that's going to be targeted for the distributed platform or for ZOS, or COBOL that's going to be targeted for the ZOS environment. I've got an experience that allows me to do what I want to do in the way I want to do it. And I know when you show charts, you can put anything in a chart. So how about I show you at least a little something real? And this happens to be my VS Code environment. And here I have a COBOL program. And yes, COBOL in VS Code. And you can see just standard COBOL program, but it's a modern editor. It's a modern editor that allows me to do all of the things that I would expect a modern editor to do. So if I want to make a code change, it's going to tell me and make it easy for me to make this code change. So even if I'm not very experienced with COBOL, I won't have any problem with a COBOL syntax. And honestly, to that point, it's just English. Move something to something, that's really just English. COBOL's not a problem. It's simple to use, and it was a language specifically designed for business use cases. It makes it easy to do that business processing and those business rules. When I use COBOL to write a UI, no, and please don't give me a 3270 interface for my end users. Give me that modern application on my phone. But for that backend system, COBOL, it's not a problem to maintain, especially if you have the modern tools like I have here. You'll notice something else. I have this test folder, and in this particular case, I have a test case that has been generated for me. I used the ZUnit capability to generate a test case that allows me to do what I need to do to test this program. And once it's been generated, it's generated in the language that my program was in. So it's generated in COBOL. And so I can run my automated test with my program. It's stored in the same SCM alongside my program. And the dependency system with the IBM dependency-based build can understand the relationship between the test case and the program and the copybooks, so that if I make a change, it can automatically recompile and run that test case for me. Now, this is VS Code because maybe I want to use VS Code. But wait, maybe I want to use Eclipse. And so I can use the Eclipse-based interface. Also from this same IBM WASI for Red Hat Code Ready Workspaces. Yeah, it's a long name. IBM loves long product names. We all get used to it. When I think about this, I can use any one of the choices of editors. And in this case, I want to use Eclipse. I've got the same modern editing capability. In this case, I'm showing that I'm connected to my ZOS. I have the same capabilities in VS Code. And here I'm showing my program control flow, which I have in my Eclipse environment. So I can use the environment that's familiar to me. I can work in the way I want to work. And both of these are connected to Git. So I get to choose the environment I want to work at. Now, I will tell you one other thing. There are a few of us who like ISPF still. And these editors provide an experience and hook into a modern pipeline. When I do my commit of my code and then push my code, it's stored in the Git server. So I can use that with any Git client. Even in this environment, if I wanted to, I could actually use an ISPF client to Git. Why am I talking about an ISPF client for Git in the middle of a cloud native development? Well, because there are a few of us out there who still like ISPF, and you can still use ISPF as the editor if all you want is an editor, and still push your code into the Git environment, and the full pipeline still runs the tests and still does all the same functions. And so even if you have a few users who still want to use the ISPF environment, they still can in this new world with the cloud native development processes. Now, let's drill into this a little bit more and think about how we do modern development. In this particular case, I wanted to draw the pictures to make it absolutely clear how things are working. But when you think about this process and you think about it a little bit more, this picture doesn't look very Z specific. It doesn't look very ZOS centric. There are some specifics on this chart that will call out the fact that it is running on ZOS, because we show things like Z development and test environments, which is the same underlying capability of the WASI sandbox running in OpenShift, but with Z development and test environments, you can run it on your own environment in a VMware image or however you want to run it in your organization. By having this ZDNT, it makes it easier for me to spin up environments. And in an OpenShift environment with the WASI sandbox or using ZDNT, I have this ability to do my individual development. Each one of my developers can have their own environment if that's what you want. Or, as many people do, you could have a sandbox dedicated to a small team so they can do their development together. But they're all working in their individual branches, allowing them to do the individual development they need to before they're ready to merge the code together. Now, you don't want this to be a long individual development, just like the normal Git development process. You want to merge frequently. You want to get those changes in with everyone else as they're working together. And you can do that, merge together to a feature branch or merge together to a set of capabilities so the team can work together. But you have that individual ability as well as that team ability. You also can see I'm doing my build, I'm doing my Z unit tests. I'm doing those unit level tests. And what is a unit when we're talking about COBOL? For COBOL, a unit is a program or the load module. I can test at a load module level The way I do it, I run my program and I do a record and playback. And within the IDZ environment or the Eclipse environment, I can do this record and playback capability that generates this test. And then I can edit that data. I can change the data and create multiple tests from that initial test. So I can test the specific code changes that I am making. But as a developer, I don't need to know how to spell out all of the control blocks and all of the memory. It's all done for me through that record and playback. But once I've captured it once, I now have all of the calls. I literally can run that program that used to run as part of a Kix environment and still does run as part of a Kix environment. I can run that exact same load module in a batch mode. So I can run it in batch and I can run the test. So I can do it in total isolation from everyone else. I'm still running it on ZOS, in the sandbox or in ZD&T or on real Z hardware, but I'm doing it in isolation and I'm not having to deploy it first. Once I've passed my level of testing, and by the way, I can do code coverage while I do my unit testing, so I can get the code coverage results. I can also do code rules scanning, so I can scan my code to make sure it meets all the code rules that are defined for my organization. And that's just built into IDZ. I can do all of those parts as part of the pipeline process to make sure the code meets the standards that have been defined for the organization. You can also do that from a code coverage standpoint to give the developer the confidence that they've actually tested the code changes that they've made. Once I have that Z unit testing done, then I can move on to the next stage of testing, and then I can continue through the process to do integration testing, API testing, and all of the other testing that I need to do. I can do as much of that pipeline on this develop phase as is appropriate to get that feedback back to the developer as fast as possible. Once I've done that and I do my pull request, that code can then get merged in and rebuilt. It gets rebuilt as part of the team build, and I can do my testing again on a ZD&T environment. My build then, though, can be shipped over to the artifact repository as part of the process. So I've built my load module and it's ready to be possibly deployed into production. It's sitting in the artifact repository and I'm going to run my next stage of tests. And I take the load module, I take that package from the artifact repository and deploy it into each test environment using Urban Code Deploy. Makes it simple because Urban Code Deploy understands how to do application deploy. It's important to recognize that there are different pieces of this picture. I need to be able to provision a system, and I might be using OpenShift with Ansible in order to provision systems. Then I need to deploy the application into that environment, and that's where tools like Urban Code Deploy come in. I deploy it into my test environment. I run my automated tests. Once I'm happy that this is successfully passing, then that same artifact can then get deployed into production at the appropriate time. Making sure that it meets the quality standards of the organization. It may end up being deployed into a user acceptance test, for example, and in that environment, the users may actually experience the change to make sure it satisfies the business goal before it moves to production, or it may roll to parts of the production environment, have it tested there, and then roll out to larger parts of the production environment. So you can stage how you want to roll it out. But that same load module that was generated early on that you can run unit tests against is the same load module that can be used all the way through. Now, if you find a defect, obviously that load module, that package will get marked as bad, and you'll come back through this process. And I'll do the same cycle, the same way I would do it on any other platform. This modern development practices, this cloud native development, allows me as a developer to work in an absolutely consistent way with the rest of the world. All of the distributed development, all of the rest of the cloud native development, and ZOS is just a big server in the back, just another target of the pipeline. It's changed the way that you can look at that development process to say, it doesn't matter if I'm building my mobile front end, I'm building a mid-tier, or I'm building a back end. I, as a developer, can work across that spectrum, and I'm not having to change tools or change experiences. I get to do that work and provide that capability to the organization without having to worry about all of those different tools or all those different processes. The other thing this brings, if we think about this agile DevOps transformation, and we think about doing the same kind of development practices with a system of record as we do with a system of engagement, we think about the fact that now everything can move at the speed business requires. I can satisfy and work toward that digital transformation because my back-end system can move as fast as any part of the organization. Now, I want to be careful to say it doesn't mean it has to move that fast. One story I like to tell is the example of a calendaring service that most large organizations have. The calendaring service provides function to all of the applications about what day it is, what day of the week. Is it a holiday? Is it a work day? Is it a weekend day? What is it? What is the day, in order to do the right kind of processing? Many of these calendaring services were written a long time ago. And last time I checked, we're still using the Gregorian calendar. And if we're using the Gregorian calendar, that calendaring service doesn't need to change that often. It needs to change every time there's a federal holiday change, or a holiday around the world change, or somebody's government decides to change what day daylight savings time is, which is always fun when they're different days, or when you want to put a new interface on the service. But otherwise, it's going to sit there and just keep running. It doesn't need to change, so you don't have to worry about changing it. But you need to be able to change it. One of the most important parts about this transformation, this digital transformation, is it's allowing you to move as fast as the business requires. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be deploying 1,000 times a day or 100 times a day. I may, because I may have a bunch of different applications and I may need to deploy at different things. But it doesn't mean I have to, but it means I can. The other thing about this process is hopefully it means I can get rid or not use the emergency change process. If I can get a change through the pipeline very quickly, why would I do anything different? Why would I circumvent the process? Why not just send that change through the pipeline so it can be processed in a normal way? And one of the things that I've been talking about is this: I'm going to provision this ZOS environment. And somewhere in this, I had to show a green screen because, well, if you're going to talk about ZOS, there's going to be a green screen, right? Well, actually, if you look at that VS Code dark mode, it looks remarkably like a green screen. That's actually a comment one of my younger developers made at one point in time when he saw ISPF versus his dark mode. It is interesting, but yes, there's a green screen. One of the ISPF screens that I know from a long time ago, and it's been there forever. But also there's a bash shell that I've brought up against my ZOS environment. But I'm showing this because this is running in an OpenShift environment. It's the container running in OpenShift. ZOS truly running in the OpenShift environment in a container. This seems a little strange. This is Intel Linux environment. This isn't a Z hardware machine. And it does seem a little unusual that I'm going to take that big ZOS environment and spin it up in a container world. But there's no reason it can't be. If we think about Z and Z hardware for any length of time, you know we've had virtualization on Z for a very long time. In Z, we've had LPARs, or logical partitions, that provide the separation on the machine. People have used ZVM, VMware virtual machines, ZVM existed before that, to spin up ZOS images on the fly for a long time. Now, not only can we spin them up in VMware, but we can spin them up in the OpenShift environment, in that container, to make it easier for your users to get the environments that they need and they want. Now, it's important to think about this in concept with a pipeline. This transition to making the dinosaur dance, to allow ZOS to move at the speed business requires today, there is a pipeline behind it. We need to make it easy for those developers to make those code changes and have it tested. This first piece is the unit testing, making sure you build up those unit tests. And I know that in many cases, there's lots of existing COBOL code or PL1 code or assembler code. There's lots of existing code. But let's focus on that Kix COBOL right now. In that Kix COBOL world, I want to create that unit test. I want to create that Z unit and then allow anyone modifying that program after me to have the advantage of those tests that I've already created and stored in the SEM. They can be now run as part of the build process. So every time that program changes, those tests can be rerun. And unless somebody makes a major overhaul to the program and changes the different calls that are being made outside the program, that unit test can keep running and it can keep verifying the capability. And past unit tests, then we're going to run other tests that I can run outside of deployment. And then once I'm satisfied with the code scanning, with the unit testing, and whatever tests else I can run there, I can then create that package and I can deploy it into an environment. And once deployed, then I run my later stage testing. And in this example, I'm actually using the Galasa framework. Galasa is an open source set of testing tool framework, test tool framework that's been created similar to JUnit, similar to JUnit, in the fact that it lets you create tests and then the framework will help you run those tests. All of those tests are stored in an SCM. They are written by the developer or a tester in a familiar development environment. And there's the Galasa framework provides a set of managers to allow you to test against the environment you're running. So against ZOS, for example, there's integration to jobs, there's integration to 3270 screens, there's integration to the system so that I can do the appropriate ZOS testing. But there's also integration to distributed components and integration to things like Selenium. So I can run Selenium tests. So I can build up my repository of tests and in Galasa identify the areas that are being tested. And so as part of my pipeline, I can run the right tests first. And I can run them in a parallelization form so I can run them quickly. Galasa actually has its heritage in a tool developed by the Kix team over the last 15 years. They built the tooling originally to allow them to be able to test Kix development. Imagine that. While I'm doing Kix development, I need to have automated testing for that. And so they built this up. And the Kix team is long down this process and is the envy of many when we think about it in how far they've gotten in their transformation. They can do that beta quality build anytime they need to. So when a developer checks in a piece of code, it's run through the automated tests, and the developer gets that feedback very quickly as to whether or not their tests work or they broke something, because it's really important not to break something in Kix. They took that tooling that they had built and they've updated and done some changes based on, it is 15 years later, and created the Galasa framework, which is open source, and any and everyone can work with it, contribute to it, add to it, go take a look. But Galasa lets me then test my application. And the next level of testing, honestly, I would focus on would be API testing. Once I have an idea that my code is working at a unit level, a transaction level, I then really want to focus on this. How do I test the APIs? Let's test when I hit an API. And what kind of APIs can I test against? Well, just about any application programming interface. But allowing you to test or testing at an API level allows you to test more efficiently because it's a contract. It's a definition of inputs and outputs. And by being able to test at that level, automated testing is much easier. Once I successfully pass all those tests, then I can release and I can be confident that my code worked. Now, there is one other piece in this pipeline that doesn't quite show up, but is absolutely critical. And that's the test data management pieces of this. When I was talking in beginning about ZUnit, I'm doing record and playback. So I want to be recording in an environment that has the right kind of data so that I'm not pulling production data for sure. It has to be masked and obfuscated, but really and truly it probably should be fabricated because it should be based on the various scenarios that I actually want to test. Once I have that first unit test, I want to think about fabricating data to fabricate the various scenarios that I want to test. I want to make sure that I'm doing error testing. I'm doing bad failure conditions. I want to give the system those errors to make sure that I'm testing for failure conditions as early as possible. Using fabricated data helps with this because I don't have lots of records that I'm running through. They're all probably good, but I'm focusing on the variability of the data, fabricating the right pieces so I can move forward with that. The other piece that's important in this pipeline is security. And I started with this discussion about DevOps. Is it DevOps or is it DevSecOps or what is it really? Well, when I think about that, security, it's always been a hallmark of IBM Z. When we think of ZOS, when we think of this system, it's there for its reliability, its scalability, its security, the pervasive encryption capabilities it provides. It's been focused on security since day one. And from a systems standpoint, we focus on security. But you're building applications. You build applications no matter whether or not you're writing in COBOL, you're writing in Java. So you need to think about your applications. And one of the key factors is security by design. Let's design security in from the very beginning. And when we think about COBOL, the reason we have code rules and code scanning is to make sure we're not putting vulnerabilities into our applications. And yes, in ZOS, since it's behind the firewall, maybe we don't think about it as much, but we still want to do good programming practices. We still want to pay attention to security exposures that we could inadvertently put in the code into the system. And so you still need to think about security by design. You still need to think about making sure you do the right error checking and the right error processing. You still need all of those good programming 101 lessons we learned all years ago. They're still applicable, and they're just as applicable to COBOL as they are to Java. Making sure we're processing our SQL correctly so we don't get SQL injection. Making sure we're thinking about how we're dealing with passing parameters so we don't end up in some memory that we shouldn't. Now, if you end up in too far off in memory to memory you don't own, you're just gonna append, but that could be what somebody's intending, crash your application. So let's think about it that way. Let's make sure we're including in our pipeline all the same kind of scanning, all the same kind of security aspects. And if we think about this pipeline, it looks like any other pipeline. So all the places where you're doing security scanning for everything else, you have the same scanning in this pipeline. You do the same kind of processing. It's the same kind of work. We want to make the experience as consistent as possible to allow you, when you're doing ZOS development, to not worry about those ZOS specific things, but focus on the development you're doing, the code that you're writing. What is the business challenge that you're trying to solve? Focus on that instead of the tooling you have to work through or learn. Now, when we think about this transformation, I've been talking a lot about different tools and different ways of working. But at the core, it's changing the culture. It's changing the way people in the ZOS world and people in the distributed world think about ZOS. Instead of thinking about it as that green screen, that system that you don't want to use, maybe start thinking about it as that bash shell that looks like any other system. Think about it as a very large, very secure server that happens to have very high reliability characteristics that allow you to run your application there. Think about it as a target of the application rather than having to use it as the way I develop my application. If I can spin up a ZOS environment in an OpenShift environment, if I can spin up my developer IDE in the code-ready workspaces environment, I can do my work no matter what I'm building for, no matter how I'm building my capability. It can be that consistent experience. And when we make it that consistent experience, it's not that different world. It's just a bigger server that happens to have a set of abilities sitting in the back that allow you to do what you need to do. The world we're in today is a very different world than just a few months ago. Over the last few months, I've seen more posts about COBOL and the need for COBOL developers than I'd seen since Y2K. And yes, I was there for Y2K as well. COBOL's not going away. The Z system as the reliable backend system is there. Not seeing it as that scary different thing, but focusing on it as the characteristics that it provides and working with it just like any other system will help us get out of this, I need COBOL developers. You need developers. You need good developers who want to do development for business critical systems. Explaining what you're doing, what's the business value in the system, and allowing developers to use the experience they want to. If I walked into a development organization today as a new developer and saw this screen, I would think modern development. I'd then have to look at the code and go, okay, what's that? And figure out it was COBOL, but I'd still see a modern environment. I know how to get my source because I know how to do a clone. I know how to look at it. I know how to look around it. It's an environment that's provided for me. I can see the outline. I can move through the program. I can learn this program effectively because I have the modern tools and the modern capability. By bringing cloud native development, by making it as easy to do development for ZOS as any other platform, we're exposing the world to the system in a different way. We're allowing developers to work on the system in a different way. And all it takes is that cultural transformation to bring these modern tools into the organization and allow those ZOS developers that modern experience. IBM's been using modern tools for our ZOS development across the board for many different cases, many different parts, transitioned at many different times. But it's not just IBM. We have many customers who have spoken about their transition and their move to modern practices for ZOS. We've had Rabobank talk about building brand new COBOL payments factory because that was the right language for the work that they were doing and it was the right system. But they didn't do that development on a green screen. They brought in a modern pipeline to allow the developers to work in a modern way. We just had State Farm talking about their transition to modern development practices. And many other customers have talked over the years about the transformation. With this next new step, bringing ZOS development into the Red Hat Code Ready Workspaces environment. We're bringing it to that next level, bringing it into the OpenShift environment, allowing that experience to be seamless for all of the parts of my development, allowing me to spin up those containers for development. Prior to this, I was having a discussion with a client about security and how security is so important. And this idea of the code-ready workspaces allowing an organization to spin up containers to manage the development environments so that they're not cloning all that code to their local workstation can be of real value. And now the ZOS code can play in that same space. It can be in those same container environments. and can be managed at the data center the same way from a security perspective. The world has moved on from the 1980s or before. Everything about the world has changed from the days when I started in IBM to today. We don't use wall phones very often anymore. We carry cell phones. Let's make sure that we're doing development, no matter what we're developing for, with that same cloud native developer experience. Let's let the developers have this modern world no matter what they're building for. Give them that opportunity of that flexibility. Give them that opportunity for experimentation. Give them that opportunity to learn more in an environment that has no challenge. Let them spin up their own spaces to learn and experiment and play. And they do a whole lot more. The innovation happens when I can experiment. The digital transformation, this culture of continuous learning, it happens as we give people the chance to experiment, to learn, and to grow. We all need to learn. We all need to grow. In the current world, we've gone through a significant transformation over the last few months. In IBM, I'm extremely lucky. We moved home instantly. 95% of the company, those of us that didn't have to be in the office, we moved home. And we're productive at home through technology. We have the opportunity to attend virtual conferences, technology events, because we're in this technology world. We can continue to evolve. We can bring the technology to everyone else. We can take advantage of this time that everyone is having to learn that technology can be helpful. Let's take that. Let's bring this technology together. Let's work to bring technology to solve the world's biggest problems. Let's work together to be strong in this time of challenge and into the future. And let's everyone have the time for continuous learning and continuing to evolve and challenge the status quo, thinking about new ways of working. How do I make the culture better? How do I make the world better? How can we use technology to continue to make our world a better place? Hopefully you enjoyed this session as part of the TechStrong conference. I enjoyed speaking to you. Stick around for the rest of the sessions, and hopefully I'll see you somewhere on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or the next time I can be face-to-face at a major event. Thank you.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right. So now it's time for the news. And the news today, it's, headlines around the MediaOps community sites, but let me get right to it. We've got DevOps helps soft hubs support independent seniors. And that it's good to see, practical applications. I'm tired of hearing people say, well, what did I ever need algebra for? You need DevOps. Article, no, very timely to our schedule today. DevOps World 2020, 4 sessions to put on your schedule. Go check that out right now, and you can catch them at DevOps World. Free your apps with an infrastructure as a code approach to storage. Good stuff there. And then heading over to Container Journal, we have Kubernetes advances 5G adoption using Kubernetes. Red Hat updates their container storage platform. And then over on Security Boulevard, we had COVID-19 leads to greater consumer awareness of data security. Well, that's looking for the silver line. And then we have what to expect when you're expecting to be hacked. I know what you are thinking. And this is it's a great article on how to prepare. Not for if, but when it happens. Anyway, that's it around just some headlines around the media ops sites today. Do go to the sites themselves and check them out. But for now, we're going to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, who has a great interview, as well as a preview of the rest of this week's webinars on media ops. Charlene, over to you.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Chris Wayne, who is the CTO at Yahoo Small Business. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me first of all about Yahoo Small Business, because I know about Yahoo, but I don't really know about Yahoo Small Business. So what do you guys do?
So every day in this country, there's about 13,000 businesses that register. And all of those businesses really need the tools to get started. So whether it's business mail, whether it's a website, whether it's a domain, there's many things. Yahoo Small Business provides all those tools. They've been around for over 20 years, and they're there for the entire life cycle of a business. So as you start, as you manage, and as you grow your business, they're kind of a trusted partner to make sure you have the tools you need to be successful at each phase of your business.
Awesome. So, in your position, then I imagine you've had lots of conversations with a lot of your customers regarding just kind of keeping the lights open during this pandemic.
We have, there's been a huge push for people to get online. A lot of brick and mortar companies that now need to go virtual, huge push for that, lots of domains, lots of websites, but also a really large increase in security. As our customers who we talk to quite often, they have employees as well. And they want to know, how do I keep my customers' data safe? How do I keep my employees out of trouble? Like, how do I manage this ecosystem now that everybody's working from home?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I imagine as they start to transition back to the office too, since, there are a lot of states that are now kind of letting at least, partial openings happen. So, and that conversation I expect has been changing from, it seemed at the beginning of the pandemic, it was almost like a free for all. It's like companies just kind of sent their employees home and said, go be productive. And, and nobody really gave a whole lot of thought to data security and compliance issues and, even accessing applications via the cloud. And I think now we're kind of starting to rein it in a little bit and have a bit of I call it a COVID hangover, because folks are waking up to the, oh my God, what have I done? Mindset. So are you hearing your customers kind of smacking their heads a little bit and saying, have I gone too far in allowing my employees to do what they've done to remain productive during this time? Or what are you hearing?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think what we found most of the feedback kind of reflects is that a lot of the best practices that business owners put in place, they should have done before, but they never did. So that hangover that you're referring to, in some cases might be good, because now what they're doing is taking these best practices they were, quote unquote, forced to do because employees were working remotely, and carrying those best practices back into the office. And we tend to focus on 5 key areas. And that is, the first one is, are your employees educated in what sensitive private data is? And are they educated on how to manage that data within the scope of their job? What are you doing to protect data? Whether it's in the office or remote, it's on employees' computers. They might be printing it at home. What do you do? And then, do you have proper security layers in place? Are you using 2FA? Are you using secure login, password protectors? And then, are you using cloud platforms? Which, to be fair, a lot of companies weren't doing, and they found now they need those collaboration tools to be successful. And then the fifth one is really, do you have best practices if there is a disaster? Do you have a playbook that if maybe you do have a breach in customer information, do you know what to do so you're not scrambling? And that's kind of the 5-point plan that I think we encourage our merchants to adopt. But quite frankly, those are industry standards. They should be adopting those.
Yeah, and I wonder if there will be a push for more organizations to maybe conduct security audits and compliance audits on their data and their networks as their employees come back because of what's been happening over the past 6 months or so.
They should, and to be just completely fair, it's something they should have been doing a long time ago.
Sure.
But it is more critical than ever. With people working from home, they may have sensitive customer information on their laptops. What do you do with that information now? And if you're kind of taking that even a little bit further, what's the proper disposal of that information? And that's something that can translate to home and the office. It's just that we're now a lot of companies are forced to face that realization.
Right. Maybe they were thinking about it before, but it was like, I'll get to it sometime. And, all of a sudden now is that time. So
exactly. Printers have hard drives, right? If you're printing stuff at home, are you properly disposing of the hard drive in your personal printer? Really complex questions start to bubble up that, you need to make sure employees are just aware.
Yeah. Well, that actually really brings up a good point is, would I know how to dump my hard drive on my printer? No, and it is something that folks, I'm sure, are not really thinking about. So, how can organizations support their employees for those things, that they normally wouldn't even think about doing, just working at home or just being at home?
Sure, this is an interesting topic because this is really about partnership. Right. And it's finding a trusted partner that's really an expert in that area. So when you're talking about data disposal, find a trusted partner, because that's what Yahoo Small Business does for your web presence, right? We're the trusted partner that'll handle the back end to your website, to your getting domains, your payment processing, an assortment of activity. We're your trusted partner there. But if you're looking for data disposal or any other activity, you want to find a trusted partner there. A lot of companies think they have to figure these things out themselves, and they just don't. There's people out there that'll help.
Sure. So so kind of the rise of the managed services provider and just IT services in general, I imagine are going to get a big uptake in new customers as organizations recognize the fact that they do have a lot of data in the wild now that they have to wrangle, and they have to do a healthy amount of educating of their employees on these these best practices for data security, but also just helping them with kind of the the day-to-day IT help desk almost issues.
No, exactly. And I think there's one really important component to this that we really didn't touch on. So we talked about a lot about kind of that virtual security, data on systems, data's on hard drives, but there's also kind of this physical aspect to it as well. With employees working from home right now, I can tell you, I know a lot about my neighbor's business. I probably shouldn't. But they like to do their conference calls from the backyard, and they actually talk really loud. And it makes you think, what other, executives, employees are out there talking in a conference call in their backyard about their company's revenue or about some of the challenges they might be having. So there's some very physical aspects of this as well. Like another one would be, do you know every device that's on your home network? I can tell you I've got 40 plus. And when you look at it, it's maybe a number letter combination. Do you know what those all are? There's definitely a physical aspect that pairs with kind of the virtual that we've been discussing, and both are critical. Both are really important.
Right. Yeah. And that's, that is definitely something that a lot more folks are going to be aware of as they move forward, because, you mentioned, how many devices you have on your network. I can't even count how many I have. And it's growing every single day, it seems like. So, those are new attack vectors. Those are new entry points into the corporate security, because if you've got sensitive company data on your laptop or your computer, and somebody tunnels into your network through an IoT device or something like that, you're kind of in big trouble. So that's also something that managed services providers or IT services providers can help organizations help their employees lock down that data. So interesting. So what are you kind of looking ahead as organizations maybe move toward that hybrid work environment, or maybe eventually kind of filter folks back into the office? What steps can they take to kind of ensure that the next time this happens, we won't be caught unawares, and we'll be a lot more prepared and a lot more secure in the way we go about doing business and working?
Sure. I think there were a lot of lessons learned. I've learned plenty making this transition myself, and I'm glad to share it with others. But I think an overall awareness of what we just went through and what your vulnerabilities might be. I think that we moved remote out of necessity. And as a result, I think corners were generally cut across the board in terms of data protection and privacy. I think what we need to do now is we're making this transition back and then perhaps into a hybrid model, is companies should really be evaluating, what do we do well? What do we struggle with? And it's really about putting plans in place to go from good to great. And that's what's really important. So when I kind of went through my 5-point plan, education was at the top.
Right.
Did your employees know, if you have sales employees working from home, do they know not to write down credit card information on a Post-it? Something as simple as that. Like, did you tell them that they can't do that? That's not appropriate. I can tell you that there's probably some companies that, at the onset would just do what you need to do to keep the company running. They've learned now.
Right.
And the same with, data protection, and the same with cloud platforms. Companies that had to implement a cloud platform for collaboration and maybe data sharing, that's not going to go away. They gained efficiencies from that are going to stay with those companies for a long time. So I think kind of doing that gap analysis and really understanding, what do we do well, what do we not, where can we improve, and being transparent with yourself and with all your employees about it. A lot of times you see, company owners, founders, executives sometimes hoard that information a little bit, because they think it's like the secret. I can't tell people like where our vulnerabilities are.
Right.
You should really be transparent about it. You need to talk to your employees about these vulnerabilities, about, not picking up a USB drive in the parking lot and plugging it into your computer. These need to be everyday conversations, not something that's done in secret.
Right. Yeah. Makes a whole lot of sense. Well, Chris, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. I expect we're going to have more conversations about just the data problem, if you will, as organizations kind of get back to bringing their employees back into the office. So thank you again. I really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here with the Tuesday edition of the Webinars Preview. As always, we have so many great webinars that are coming up on both DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, but I wanted to take a few minutes and tell you about some of the webinars that we have specifically coming up on DevOps.com. We have so many of them, so almost too many to tell you about. But here we go. Okay, the first one is happening tomorrow, Wednesday, September 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. It is called Bridging Operations and Development with Observability. It's being sponsored by Datadog, and the webinar will talk about how introducing monitoring and observability earlier in the software development lifecycle can provide greater visibility for both developers and operations teams. And it will also offer up some strategies to segment development and production environments using the Datadog technology. So again, this one is happening Wednesday, September 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. The next webinar is called Avoid Unhappy Returns, Proactively Plug Your Revenue Leaks. This one is also happening Wednesday, September 23rd. This one is at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's being sponsored by a company called Revenera, which is the company formerly known as Flexera. We all know that COVID-19 has had a major impact on IT spending, and it's going to be, if it was up, now it's coming down. We call it the COVID-19 hangover. But there are a lot of things that organizations that they have that can impact their revenue. Ineffective software licensing, undiscovered open source vulnerabilities, even choosing the wrong business model also can, all of those can negatively impact revenue streams. So this webinar will talk about how software suppliers can proactively protect their revenue both now and moving forward. So, if this has been something that's keeping you up at night, making you sweat a little bit about your revenue model, definitely check out this webinar. We should have some actionable items and good tips for you to follow. And the last webinar that I want to let you know about today is called Getting Stakeholder Buy-in for Chaos Engineering. Happening Thursday, September 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. Chaos engineering is actually, I think, becoming a lot more popular as more organizations kind of understand what it's all about and understand the value that it can bring. So, but sometimes effectively communicating the value of chaos engineering and the ROI is can be pretty difficult for any chaos engineering practitioner. And I think anybody could use a little bit of help in that area. So the folks at Gremlin, who are sponsoring this webinar, they're going to offer up some tips and tricks to help kind of sell chaos engineering in your organization and help, basically provide that roadmap for getting it, getting it engaged with your DevOps teams. So that is what we have, and would love to get your feedback on the webinars that we're having on the sites. If you do have any comments, questions, please go ahead and send them on over to me, editor@devops.com. Love to hear your feedback, and also want to hear about what you guys want to see in the way of webinars. So if you are got anything to offer up, please do. Again, you send those comments to editor@devops.com. All right, I will be back on Thursday with more webinar previews. But until then, please enjoy your day and stay safe.
Thanks, Charlene. That was great. Good stuff there. Next up, you know what? I said at the top of the hour we didn't have an analyst corner, but you know, that's the beauty of live TV here. Mitchell Ashley has come through, and he has an analyst corner for us today. So let's now head over to Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group.
And welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. Well, it's DevOps World 2020 week. Lots of great activities going on. You've heard me talk about it. I'm sure you've received other emails and information about the conference. But today's a special day, not just because of DevOps World 2020, as important as it is, but also because Accelerated Strategies Group is releasing its latest research report. I don't know about you, but I've received a lot of emails about asking me about remote work and COVID-19 and how you adjust it, and seen some pretty interesting surveys and studies that have come out of that, some good work. And when we talked about what we might do in this area, we thought, let's take a little bit of a different tact. If we were doing this all over again and it wasn't driven by a pandemic where we said, let's move all of our staff remote. Let's have everybody work remotely at least as much as possible that made sense where we could, and kind of forego offices and shift to a really remote model. Now, there are companies who do that by default. That's how they built their company, but most haven't. They have groups within the organization, road warriors in sales, executives who travel for a lot of their business life, if you will. I know I've been on the road a lot in my roles. So there are folks that are pretty well steeped in what it's like to work remotely. And I have to be honest with you, running an IT organization, one of the things I tried to implement was more of a work anywhere strategy, or work everywhere, so that those folks who are remote aren't kind of second-class citizens. They have the full capabilities and everyone interacting on a call or working together, collaborating together. It's not reliant upon them being in the office. Now, one group who we all know has been doing remote work, remote development, is software developers. I've worked with teams who were all remote. Nobody lived in the same town. They were all working online, daily, on a daily basis. And maybe once in a while they would get together, meet up at a local kind of rent some space office business area. But really they were fully remote. And a lot of developers have been doing that even on their own, because they could set up independent development environments with self-contained on their laptop. I've seen people writing code on planes because they can do a lot of, install a lot of the software there and work independently without reliance on other resources. They can use Git to check out portions or all the repo, everything that they need. And you add cloud to that, especially if most of your resource, maybe all, are between what you have in your development environment and sitting up in the cloud. You don't have to be in an office. Maybe use a VPN to get back there if you really need to, but a lot of folks don't even do that. They're fully remote. So software developers would be a great resource to rely upon, as might other groups. If you're going to do this whole pandemic situation over, easy to say, I'm not taking that lightly, but if you think about it, if we were going to go remote, let's take all of our workforce, or at least most of it, go into a remote mode, forego offices, maybe close down the offices. Let's just become a remote company. If you were going to do that, you would approach this much differently. You wouldn't have to implement it in a matter of days or maybe a week where you suddenly flip everybody to being remote. You would have thought about it a little bit more, done more planning. Maybe you even relied on some of the groups like software developers who are already well-versed in how to work remote and were working with other parts of the organization remotely. So when we embarked on this research that we're launching today, it's called The Future of Remote Work and Software Development. That was the tack that we took. Let's look at it from the perspective of we have software developers. What were they doing before COVID-19? Were they working remote? How much? How long had they been doing that? Was it a fairly recent thing? Was it something that, 5 or more years ago, they had shifted to that model? And then after the pandemic really took effect and we all started having to work remote, what was the impact there? And what things could we learn, or maybe did we learn working with our development teams, software development teams? And ultimately, what impact did it have? Our priorities changed. Were we able to still deliver software? Is it taking a little bit longer? Is it happening faster? Are we collaborating more, collaborating less? And that's what this research is about. So it really looks at all of those questions. Now, what I think is really interesting about this is there's some really good data that shows that organizations have adopted more and more of Agile and DevOps principles. They're doing more cross-functional teams. They're collaborating together through online tools, even more so. Well, guess what? When you're forced to work remotely, you're not sitting down the hall or next cube over from someone. We kind of have to find other ways of doing that, and email doesn't tend to work very well for really ongoing true collaboration. At least my inbox doesn't function well for that. So that's one of the things that organizations really started to adopt more DevOps principles. Another is some of the major initiatives really changed in priority. We had a large number of people report that their shift towards even greater move towards digital transformation, automation kinds of activities, and moving to the cloud really accelerated over the last 4 or 5 months, 6 months. And that's, of course, a notable difference. I've heard anecdotally people say we've accomplished more in our digital transformation in the last 6 months, 6 months than we have in the last 3 years. Maybe we've even accelerated and gotten multiple years worth of progress in the last few months. Anecdotally, not something that's included in our research, but certainly the change in priorities are. In addition, the shift to the cloud, that's another thing that our research showed is more people more quickly over the last several months shifting their resources to the cloud. If they're on a path to that, they increase their pace and intensity of doing that. So some really great findings in this. Now, I'm not going to give you all the details because there's a lot more kind of stats and information than I can share with you in a video and that you probably want to watch. But look at what developers are doing pre-COVID. We look at what the positive impact to the shift to remote work, things like how much adoption of DevOps and Agile principles, what kind of collaboration is happening now across organization, business units, and job functions. Are people measuring productivity, or are they just kind of anecdotally looking at it? And what about the productivity, particularly of developers? Has this slowed them down, or has this actually increased the pace? I think you'll find the findings on that to be very interesting and a little bit surprising for me, actually. But of course, ultimately, I mentioned earlier the speed of software delivery, kind of software delivery management. Are we able to deliver software at the same pace, faster, slower? Have we ultimately gotten slower because of all the confusion and turmoil and disruption, et cetera. So those are some really interesting, and that last stat I think is something you'll find very interesting in this report, because there's not a clear winner one way or another. And of course, what kind of tools are we using? And I thought also one area that we focused in of what happens after we can go back to work. Are people going to want to go back to work? Do they want to go back into an office? Or are they liking, after several months of this, are they liking the work from home or work remote model? Now, I tend to refer to work remote more often than work at home because at some point, we may not be forced to work at home. Our remote work could be back in the coffee shop, could be while we're traveling, could be at multiple locations. So I think a lot of the patterns we develop, habits that we have relearned or new habits we've learned in remote work can apply more than just to the home setting. So there's some great stats on all that. So I hope you'll check it out. You can go to the Accelerated website, Accelerated Strategies website at accelst.com. You can also just append report-remote work, and that will get you right to the report. You can download it. There's an executive summary. There's a full version of the report if you fill out a registration, all kinds of good stuff. And I think you'll really enjoy it. Now, we, of course, take a different approach in our reading out of our research. Number one, a report is not your typical 40-page, high-density Word, really an investment to read and consume. We have certainly some written commentary, both up front, summarizing, but also at the end, drawing some conclusion and applying some of our knowledge to it. But most of it is kind of infographic form of information, so it's very consumable. You can look at the report and almost read no paragraph. You can just look at headings of the content to see what each stat was and what the report was. And then you can dig into the write-up if you feel so inclined. You, of course, can also watch our videos on the webpage. So you actually wouldn't have to report. You could walk away with most of the salient points, certainly a lot of the great ones that came out of the research work, by just watching those video, we call them knowledge nuggets. That's right there on the download page. So take advantage of that. I hope that that will help save you some time, because we want our content to be extremely approachable, very easy to consume, and not take much time. So check it out. You can find out more information at accelst.com/report-future work. That's all one word, future work. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you on our next episode of Analyst Corner.
Your CI/CD pipe and put your observability on. Ground control to Major Tom.
10, 9, ignition sequence
countdown, engines on.
6, 5,
check ignition
4,
and may God's
3,
love be with you.
This is Major Tom to Ground Control. DevOps Command is here to say, I have a great way for you to engage today. DevOps looks very different, but not to worry. We have KK to show you the way, and Batya Galoob has something to say. And more. DevOps Experience 3 is coming your way October 22nd. And as it has been since the first, it's virtual. We know everything's virtual today, but this one is designed virtual from the start, and it's free, as it should be. We have great speakers beyond KK and Batya Galoob, along with lots of learning and interactive chat, expo halls. We're going to be covering CI, CD, observability, GitOps, SRE, tools, the humans of DevOps, and some surprises too. Sign up today at DevOpsExperience.com. DevOps Experience is going to go where no DevOps conference has ever gone before, and the force will be with you. So can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? See you at DevOps Experience, October 22nd, DevOpsExperience.com. All right. Hey, I don't know how many of you caught it after Mitchell's Analyst Corner today, but there was our promo there for DevOps Experience. You know, every year the gang and I like to have some fun here, shooting a kind of silly promo around a theme. This year's theme for DevOps Experience was space. We did something, a riff on David Bowie's Space Odyssey and NASA and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. But DevOps Experience this year is going to be great. I know there's a lot of DevOps shows in the end of October this year, but the beauty of having them virtual is you can see them all. We have KK, founder of Jenkins, speaking. John Willis is speaking. A whole bunch of other great speakers that will be presenting. We're really excited with it. So do check out DevOpsExperience.com. Hope you enjoyed the promo. Hope you enjoyed today's show. We'll be back Thursday with new, fresh content. Enjoy DevOps World, too, if you're heading over there. But for now, this is Alan Schimmel for MediaOps. Hey, everyone, stay well, stay safe, stay strong, tech strong. We'll see you Thursday.